Welcome to Bellingham Unitarian Fellowship. I'm Reverend Paul Beckel. It is so good to be together today. I am happy to be with those of you on Zoom, and since I won't have a chance today to even ask, how are you? Please send me an email. I'm easy to reach, paul@buff.org or minister@buff.org. I'd love to hear from all of you. And whether I've met you or not, that applies to those of you here in this room. So I'm glad to be here in person as well as on Zoom. And I want to put a special welcome to those who are visiting for the first time. It's good to be with those who have been supporting the work of this congregation and the Unitarian Universalist movement for months, for decades, and for generations, some of you. But why? Why is it good to be together as a congregation? What are we here for? I'm asking that question today, not just in a reference to being here on Sunday mornings, and I'm definitely not asking it in terms of what's in it for you or for me, but for us, collectively, in 2022, in what ways is it good that we exist in Bellingham as a fellowship? What is our common purpose? Thank you, Andrea. It's long been a Unitarian Universalist tradition to light a flaming chalice as we begin our services and other activities with some inspiring words. Finding a common purpose doesn't mean that we find a uniform way in which we all contribute to the purpose in the same way. Our purpose is multidimensional and accomplished by each of us living to our own higher purposes. In the Christian scriptures, we read, "The body is one. All the members of the body, though many, are one body. If the foot would say, 'Because I am not a hand, I do not belong to that body,' that would not make it any less a part of the body. And if the ear would say, 'Because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body,' that would not make the ear any less a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? If the whole body were hearing, where would the sense of smell be? The eye cannot say to the hand, 'I don't need you,' nor again the head to the feet, 'I have no need of you.' If one part of the body suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, then all are honored." And I thought of that passage both because today I'm talking about the role of this congregation as a congregation, our multiple parts, but also that we are one part of the larger body of our larger community. Let's say together our covenant. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service gives it life. Celebrating our diversity and joined by a quest for truth, we work for peace and honor all creation. This is our covenant. And let's stand and sing together number 347, Gather the Spirit. Number 347 in the gray hymnal.
Gather the Spirit, earnest the power, our separate fires will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery of this hour, our trials in this life appear all the same. Gather in peace, gather thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion, and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit of heart and mind. Seeds for the sowing are laid in store. Nurtured in love and conscience refined, with body and spirit united once more. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion, and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit growing in all, drawn by the moon and fed by the sun. Winter to spring and summer to fall, a chorus of life resounding as one. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion, and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. And please stay standing so you can join in on the next song, which most of us know and will teach the rest of us. And Gina is going to help the kids to do the motions. So either join in or just watch the principal song. One, each person is important. Two, be kind in all you do. Three, we're free to learn together. Four, and search for what is true. Five, all people have a vote. Six, build a fair and peaceful world. Seven, take care of Earth's lifeboat that will bring us back to me and you. Okay, good. Now that we've shown how it goes, we're going to unpack it a little bit. So Paul is going to read the highfalutin adult language. Principle number 1, please.
We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote, number 1, the inherent worth and dignity of every person.
Which is to say, one, each person is important.
2, 2, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations.
Which is to say, to be kind in all you do.
3, we covenant to affirm and promote acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations.
3, we're free to learn together.
4, we covenant to affirm and promote a free and responsible search for truth and meaning.
4, and search for what is true.
Number 5, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large.
5, each person has a vote.
6, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all.
6, build a fair and peaceful world.
You want to do that one again?
Yeah, it has 6 words. Build a fair and peaceful world. Count them. Build a fair and peaceful world.
And number 7, we, the members of the congregation, we member congregations. That's an important distinction here. We're not talking about we individual Unitarian Universalists. We're talking about 1,000+ congregations around the country, which each, as congregations, this congregation has covenanted to be with those 1,000 some other congregations, that as a congregation we shall affirm and promote, number 7, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part.
7, take care of Earth's lifeboat that will bring us back to me and you. Okay, so this is the song we all want to have memorized because nobody can memorize all that. All right, but you can memorize this, especially if you know the motions. And we're going to sing it for grace at the beginning of the potluck after church. So you can kind of be reviewing it in your mind during the service. Here we go. 1, each person is important. 2, be kind in all you do. 3, we're free to learn together. 4, and search for what is true. 5, each person has a vote. 6, build a fair and peaceful world. 7, take care of Earth's lifeboat that will bring us back to me and you. Bravo!
And the kids take their children's chalice with them as they go, and we sing to them. We hold you in our love as you go. May your heart be at peace as you go. To nurture the spark of your precious life, we hold you in our love as you go.
Good morning. For this morning's anti-racism moment, I wanted to share a little bit about the concept of intersectionality. For some of you, this might be old news. For some of you, kind of still thinking in a more deconstructed way, it might be a harder concept. So to understand intersectionality, it might be helpful to look at your own identity for just a moment. Please raise your hand if you identify with being a Unitarian. How about a student? How about being over 40? How about being under 40? How about an artist of any kind? How about a professional of any kind? Okay. So those you might consider deconstructed identities, like specific categories, right, where you identify with that group. To understand intersectionality, we combine these things together. So please raise your hand if you're both a Unitarian and under 40. Okay. Imagine now how the experience of being a Unitarian under 40 is different from the experience of being a Unitarian over 40. What unique strengths and what unique struggles does this group of UU young adults have? Now raise your hand if you've ever been a student over 40. Anybody? Awesome. Okay. Imagine how the experience of being a student is different when you're over 40 versus being a student under the age of 40. What unique strengths and what unique struggles do older adult students have? That is intersectionality in a nutshell. We all belong to multiple identity groups that intersect and overlap. When you have combined identities, it is not just two separate identities. They intersect, and there is a meaning beyond just a student and just a person over 40, right? There's a synergy and a complexity that emerges when we consider these two things together, the intersection of those two identities. So in the context of anti-racism or anti-oppression, intersectionality is an analytical framework for understanding how aspects of a person's social and political identities combine to create different modes of discrimination and privilege, both. So intersectionality identifies multiple factors of advantage and of disadvantage. Examples of these factors could include gender, caste, sex, race, disability, ethnicity, class, sexuality, religion, weight, physical appearance, and so on. These intersecting and overlapping social identities may be both empowering and oppressing. So intersectional analysis considers the collection of factors and not just the individual factors in isolation. Kimberly Crenshaw is often credited with coining the term in 1989. She was a civil rights attorney, and she's a scholar. And she criticized court decisions where they considered race and gender in isolation specifically. For example, there was a case against General Motors where 4 black women alleged discrimination because there was a seniority law where, or seniority rule where they did layoffs based off of seniority. And they said, well, you know, you didn't start hiring black women until 1962, so like we haven't had the chance to work here long enough to have seniority. And what the court did is they said, because you had black employees, there's no racial discrimination. And because you had female employees, there's no gender discrimination. And so they lost that case. And so her criticism was that it wasn't enough to just say you have black employees and you have female employees. The point was they didn't have any black female employees, and that identity combined was its own unique thing and should be treated differently under the law. Intersectional feminists and authors such as Audre Lorde and Angela Davis wrote about the concept of intersectionality in terms of feminism. That became popular in the 1980s. And then recently, this concept has kind of exploded on the scene, both in terms of people, activists using the concept of intersectionality and popularizing it so that it's more well understood, and conservatives in particular strongly criticizing it as sort of like anti-white men. And so it's really important to understand and take some time to think about your own intersectional identities and how we can look at each other in an intersectional way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. I certainly didn't get how, until you talked about that court case, it was hard for me to understand it in concrete terms, and that really, really helped. Frances Dana Gage worked closely with Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Amelia Bloomer, Frederick Douglass, and fellow Universalist Clara Barton to advocate for women's rights, abolition, temperance, and other social reforms. She was among the first to champion voting rights without regard to race or gender, and was particularly outspoken supporter of giving the franchise not only to newly freed African American men, but to women as well. What an interest. I did not know what she was talking about, but exactly. In 1852, Frances Dana Gage expressed her determination and commitment to her causes with new words for an old Welsh ballad. Today, 170 years later, let's rise together as if Gage and all of her compatriots were here with us, our arms linked together, and with our best 19th century can-do spirit, feel the compassion, the longing, the sorrow, and the solidarity that swell in us as we sing 100 years hence.
100 years hence, what a change will be made. Our politics, morals, religion, and trade. In statesmen who wrangle or ride on the fence, these things will be altered 100 years hence. Our laws then will be uncompulsory rules, our prisons converted to national schools. The pleasure of sinning, 'tis all a pretense, and people will find that 100 years hence. All cheating and fraud will be laid on the shelf. Men will not get drunk nor be bound up in self, but all live together, good neighbors and friends, as Christian folks ought to 100 years hence. Then woman, man's partner, man's equal shall stand, while beauty and harmony govern the land. To think for oneself will be no offense. The world will be thinking 100 years hence. Oppression and war will be heard of no more, nor blood of a slave leave a stain on our shore. Conventions will then be a useless expense, for we'll go free suffrage 100 years hence. Instead of speech making to satisfy wrong, we'll all join the chorus to sing freedom's song. And if the millennium is not a pretense, we'll all be good neighbors 100 years hence.
The dreams of Frances Dana Gage and her cohort were inevitably framed by their context. They envisioned something different, better for the world, not with the naive, self-centered whine of, I want it now, but with agonizing acknowledgement that, as obvious as it was to them, that their vision for society was true and just, still it wouldn't come fast and it wouldn't be cheap. And though they had a beautiful vision for the future, they couldn't possibly have known that by the time the future got there, it would bring new conditions, new obstacles, astonishing new resources, and unimaginable new concerns. In 1852, when she wrote the lyrics to 100 Years Hence, small local rail lines were just beginning to grow into interstate networks. By the time the 15th Amendment was passed to establish the right to vote in the U.S. without regard to race, which was in 1870, the United States was deeply entrenched in the fossil fuel-dependent industrial revolution. By the time she died in 1884, the United States had nearly completed its eradication of indigenous peoples, and corporations had ascended into preeminent power. Her dream of prohibiting the manufacture and sale of alcohol didn't come into being until 1919, and voting rights for women, of course, not until all her friends were long gone. Laws and practices around labor, immigration, education, religious freedom, privacy, and care for the well-being of those on the margins of society varied dramatically as the years passed. I am not sure if what I have said so far has come across as a celebration of progress or a lament, or just a plain-spoken enumeration of what we need to thrive as a society. If you're feeling overwhelmed, I'd like to pull you back for a moment from any sense of gloom and urge you for just a couple of minutes, while Andrea plays a little quiet music, imagine a better future. However many years ahead that may be, what kind of future do you seek to bring into being? And when I say you seek, imagine those reformers who knew it would not be in their lifetimes. In my humble opinion, Prohibition of alcohol was not the best idea of the early progressive movement. The intentions were noble, but many of them were universalists. They did not believe in hell, so how could they have understood the notion of hell being paved, the road to hell being paved with good intentions? And yet so much has been accomplished by justice-seeking Unitarians and Universalists and Catholics and Muslims and Buddhists and Quakers and Christian Scientists. Yes, we have a long history of successfully collaborating with unexpected allies over the centuries. So with a sense of humility, an awareness of both the extraordinary courage and social progress that has been made in recent centuries by small groups of dedicated people, and the setbacks, I invite you now to step into the here and now, the here and us, to consider, since love is the spirit of this fellowship and service gives it life, what is it that we of the Bellingham Unitarian Fellowship, the people in this room, and hundreds of others out there, we have about 600 current members and friends and guests in our database who are paying attention to what's going on here, who are contributing regularly and generously. This us, along with all of those who are yet to jump on the bandwagon next week and next year, given the needs and opportunities right here in our own lives, in the community beyond Buff, within our sphere of influence, how do we want to impact this world with love and service? Given our combined money and fundraising capacity, our space, our equipment, our wisdom, our organizational heft and flexibility, our reputation, our staffing, volunteers, know-how, our relationships in the wider community, what should be our common purpose utilizing all of those gifts? And what specific gap is there out there that we can fill that would otherwise not be filled? Over the decades, this congregation has been a safe haven. We have been as a megaphone and a billboard declaring that love embraces all. And now, it's 2022. Post something, pre something else, seemingly in the middle of everything. Maybe not the right time to reconfigure our identity with microscopic focus, but maybe a time to recalibrate in rough terms, or at least to understand together who we want to be. 8 years ago, I offered a sermon on this topic and shared 4 broad categories representing ways that congregations historically have lived out their sense of service to the world beyond their own walls. Within any congregation, of course, there will be individuals and groups who act in all of these different ways that I'm about to talk about. And the borders between the different styles are fluid. So we can't precisely measure any of what I'm going to talk about, but it can be useful both to remind ourselves that there are many ways to be engaged in the betterment of the world, and it can be useful for us to hear from one another about how our perspectives might have shifted, or not, in light of so many changes in the world around us. So there's a chart in your order of service, and for those of you on Zoom, it's up on your screen. It's also, for those of you on Zoom, Walt is putting a link in the chat box. You can click on that link and it'll bring you to a full-size image of the chart. So this is based on a study of 177 mainline churches and synagogues, and I've adapted it to a Unitarian Universalist context. So let's step through these categories one at a time and consider how they might apply or appeal. Every one of these forms of social ministry is in sync with our UU principles and with our ideals of being an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, multicultural organization. In fact, we need to be a bit of all of them for that purpose. Maybe we need all of them. That's for you to talk about, you to vote on. But what really is suited for us now in our desire to become a beloved community? And as you look at that, try not to get too caught up in the labels. Probably any one of those 4 labels have associations for you that you need to shut off and just read what I mean by them, so that we can have a common language to talk about them. So now as to the civic. To the degree that we have a civic orientation, we support efforts to maintain the basics of a quality public life: food, housing, education, libraries, arts, parks. To the degree that we have an activist orientation, we see our mission as working together to change existing social structures in order to guarantee justice and equal rights for all people. These 2 categories correspond in a lot of ways. They may address similar issues. The key difference I'd like you to think about is this: do you envision Buff as more of a let's make things better within the current system, say by stocking the food bank, or working to change the system so that there is no need for a food bank? Now, noting that there are many liberal and conservative approaches to how we might change the system to eliminate the food bank. Eliminate the need. I'm not trying to be sarcastic about eliminating the food bank, eliminating the need. I'm not asking which of these approaches is best for society as a whole. I'm asking, to what extent do you see Buff engaging in one or the other now? For example, the civic approach to parks might mean cleaning them up together, whereas the activist approach would be to ensure that land is set aside for more parks, or that programs exist to ensure that disability doesn't interfere with people's access to parks. 20 years ago, probably even 8 years ago when I did this, it was starting to creep in that direction. I would have said that the difference between these 2 orientations is that civic is more mainstream, and activist pushes to increasingly progressive solutions. Today, I think it's a lot harder to make that distinction when adequately funded libraries and school libraries with books in them are considered radical. On the other hand, this distinction, in my mind, may be a form of naivete and privilege. For example, 20 years ago, I would have said that promoting voter registration was an ordinary civic activity. But today, it's radical. Except for communities of color, it's probably always been a radical idea. So let's take a moment to consider how you see Buff as a civic and/or activist congregation. Francis Dana Gage was most certainly an evangelist, speaking publicly for women's rights and abolition and temperance. There's a lot of overlap between the evangelistic and the activist orientation. Labor strikes and shouting in the streets on occasion has undermined systems of oppression. And then sometimes the value of making noise, the great value of making noise, lies mostly in pulling people together in solidarity, making sure that those who feel lost in an unjust system do not feel alone. One distinction that we might make between the activist and evangelical orientation is that you might think of the activist as more concerned with material causes, specific things, concrete things, and the evangelist concerned more with ideals and principles. The original meaning of evangelist is one who spreads the Christian gospel. So if you don't resonate with the Christian gospel or how it has evolved, please don't dismiss this category altogether. I couldn't find a synonym. But I've translated it here, and I don't think it's inaccurate to say that proclaiming the ideals and principles of liberal religion in general and Unitarian Universalism in particular has a great deal of value. So to the degree to which our mission is evangelical, translated, we can be the local voice of liberal religion. We will learn of our Unitarian Universalist heritage and values so that we can let others know that there is a religion without dogma that honors the worth and dignity of every person. In doing so, we will support the national UU movement, and we will work to create interfaith connections, and will be a visible and inviting presence in the larger community. And finally, sanctuary. Let's not forget that a vital way to be of service to the world beyond these walls is to ensure that within these walls, people feel like they belong. They are welcome, they are nourished, that their cares are our cares. We are a safe haven for growth, recovery, and spiritual exploration. That Buff is a retreat from the trials of life, a welcoming home for all, where we join together for introspection and inspiration, and to celebrate and mourn life's passages. Can this be our beloved community? Not just internally, but can sanctuary be an important part of beloved community, where we gather our strength so that we can go back out into the world where it is so damn hard, where we can go out and do good work according to our principles. We might be a supremely welcoming and supportive congregation, however, to a lot of people, but not so much to others. It's a question of culture. And the good news is that culture can change. Where we may be good, we can be better. I'm going to be speaking next week about beloved community as a nurse log. I attended a couple of webinars last month about welcoming neurodivergence in our congregations. I will say more about this in the midweek update and in future services. It's certainly complicated, but suffice it to say that welcoming people with different needs, different ways of being in the world, different ways of learning and expressing themselves, and I guess that's us. I think these factors are all of us, and it's incredibly hard to welcome all of those various ways of being. Being accessible to one person can make us inaccessible to the next person. Only if we discover and grind through the discovery process of finding win-win situations and strategies, and ensuring that everyone has a voice in the conversation that crafts those strategies. That's the only way that we can truly be in the process of continuing to grow and to welcome. It's not, I grew up in Minnesota where being nice was the way to be. That's all you had to be, just be nice. Well, that doesn't cut it for beloved community. Especially because we're all going to be learning at different paces. We're going to be learning different parts. And somehow we have to be patient and not yell at each other because we're learning about it in different ways and practicing different ways. And that it's going to go on and be beautiful. I'll conclude by saying that, of course, we can easily denigrate any of these styles by imagining excesses and stereotypes. The civic orientation might be criticized as too supportive of the status quo. The evangelical focus might be criticized as pushy or embarrassingly zealous, talking about Unitarian Universalism. The activist, when we're in activist mode, we may become blind to our own faults and so caught up in the whirlwind of our zeal that we lose our grounding. Activism can also be associated with the behaviors that drove many of us away from self-righteous religious traditions of our childhood. And as a sanctuary, we might be seen as afraid to take a stand, enabling, tolerant of perspectives that are not sufficiently advanced, and the people who hold those perspectives. I'm going to ask you now to set all those caricatures aside and see the highest potential in each of these styles of social ministry. When I shared this model with Buff 8 years ago, I asked for feedback, and now I'm going to ask you for the same thing. It's impossible to precisely quantify such fuzzy categories, but it may be useful to compare what we dreamed ourselves to be back then and what we dream ourselves to be now. So I'd like you to make a little note in your order of service and then place it in a basket, which will be outside the door as you leave. If you're on Zoom, your votes are important too. If you have a paper order of service, just write in each corner of the boxes the percentage that you envision Buff to be of this orientation. Kind of what we are now, but more what you envision we are becoming, what you wish to see us becoming, what you think we can and should become. So, say you think of us as 100% civic, then just put 100 up there and leave the rest alone, or put zeros. If you see 25, 25, whatever, no going over 100. And then I will, and on Zoom, you can email me, paul@buff.org or minister@buff.org, again, with a simple sanctuary X, evangelical X, etc. So I'll compile these and share with you not only the results from now, but comparison to how we viewed ourselves back then. Back then we had 95 responses, so I think it was enough to give a meaningful look at ourselves. Again, please don't focus on what's most desperately important to you personally, but what you think we should devote our resources to as a congregation, because we have the potential to fulfill a need in our community, maybe something that no one else is doing. I see a number of people here who I haven't met, which I'm thrilled about and hope to have a chance to meet you after the service. And I hope that you, no matter how long you've been here, if this is the first time you come, vote also. You are a part of this picture. The future is kind of underrepresented. The people who aren't here yet need to have a vote. So everybody, and if you really want to bring this paper home, either because it's meaningful to you or because you want to think about it for a couple of days, that's fine. Still email me then with your vote. Paul@buff.org, minister@buff.org. Whether we are helping individuals directly with their basic needs, raising our own awareness, teaching practical skills, or modeling interpersonal communication skills, whether we're building relationships so that we can effectively work within existing power structures, or actively interfering with unjust power structures, we can bring our best selves to serve the greater good. And now I invite the ushers forward to receive your generous offerings to continue, so to help us continue the work that we are doing and move ourselves into our next era. Andrea is going to be playing a song by a tune by Dmitri Kabalevsky, which has a theme and variation. So it has one overall theme and then four different variations that flow through it. So. Wow, what an excellent demonstration that all the parts are important and create a beautiful whole. I love it. Today, as Kevin noted, we have a potluck after the service. Even if you didn't bring something to eat, please come down and join us. This is a matter of culture. A robust potluck culture, there is no risk at all for me to say what I just said about come down. But I don't know if we have a robust potluck culture. It's been so long. But unless we try, we're never going to know. I don't mean try to have a potluck. I mean try to feed everybody who comes, even if they didn't bring anything, because that's the nature of Beloved Community, and we want to be able to get there in this way and in so many other ways. So let's sing now for our benediction it's almost 10:30. So let's sing number 1058, and then we'll circle around for freedom. No, we can still do the benediction. It's short enough. Yeah. We're not stuck in a box of 60 minutes. 1058 in the blue hymnal.
Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere, its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works of love.
That was written by Theodore Parker from the early 19th century, and our benediction is from Olympia Brown. Olympia was from the late 1800s and was the first woman whose ordination was recognized by a national denomination as a Universalist. So let's read together number 569. Stand by this faith, work for it, and sacrifice for it. There's nothing in all the world so important as to be loyal to this faith, which has placed before us the loftiest ideals. And I invite you to translate faith in such a way as it's our highest ideals, which has comforted us in sorrow, strengthened us for noble duty, and made the world beautiful. Do not demand immediate results, but rejoice that we are worthy to be entrusted with this great message, that you are strong enough to work for a great true principle without counting the cost. Go on finding ever new applications of these truths and new enjoyments in their contemplation, always trusting in the one God which ever lives and loves. And let's circle round. I'll have you move, give you a minute to move, and then we'll sing circle round.